Check that out, 30 pounds and 12 ounces of lovely, lovely mirror carp. Came just after first light, screaming take this morning and a lovely fight. Let's take a moment to admire this fine spring carp before I tell you where we are and what we're up to. Welcome to Mainline Baits, Carp Fishing TV, and you join me at Embryo Angling's Holdens Lake at the Norton Disney complex in Lincoln. Now it's a day ticket fishery that each and every one of you can come and visit if you should wish, and it's really coming on this lake. 11 acres in size, roughly 400 carp inside, loads of 30s up to sort of 38, 39, but I wouldn't mind betting there's probably a couple of 40s swimming around in here at the minute. You know, the early spring fish are quite sort of pumped up. You know, they're getting ready for spawning. It's not spawning time yet, but they're definitely well swollen. They're probably, the big females, probably at their best ever weights. Now, in the main, Holdens is a really deep lake. There's depths to well over 25 feet in here, and because of that, I'm sort of trying to think about my approach before I come here. You know, deep lakes take longer to warm up, but what usually happens is the fish pop up high into the upper layers to take advantage of the warmer weather. And if you've got some shallow ground, then the fish will drift into that. Now, there's a sort of no fishing bank to the left of Peg 10 here, and a real shallow margin that runs along the side of it. Now, having walked there yesterday, it was absolutely stacked with fish, like maybe 30 or 40 that I could see that were on the shallow ground, and then some out just sort of high in the water, further out over the deep water. Now, the first thing I did, I was drawn to this big open clear spot that was 3 foot deep, and I've cast my marker across to it, got it onto the spot, gone round and checked that it's in the right area, and it looked great. The fish were there, they're swimming all around the marker float, but you could just tell that you were going to get done by the birds. Now, what I did at that point was I got a bucket of 10 and 15 mil essential cell, again sort of soaked in lake water and smart liquid, as you probably have seen me do before. And because it's such short range, I just handballed some out over the shallow ground around the marker, but I also lobbed some quite far out just as it was sort of going down and out of sight, and into the weed as such, in slightly deeper water. Now, I came back to the swim, I put out a wafter onto the shallow ground on my combi multi-rig, 15 mil cell wafter. In my heart, I just knew it was going to get picked up by birds. By the time I got rigged up, they were already there eating the bait that I'd thrown out. But I put 2 naked chods out just away from the shallow ground, just down the shelf, just into the weed. Both fish with pineapple pop-ups about an inch off the bottom on those naked chods. And not long after they'd been out there sort of yesterday evening, a lovely 31 pound 12 ounce mirror. Now, that was a great start. I rebaited just going into dark, recast, got them all out there lovely. And then nothing's happened through the night. Lake's all steaming, looking absolutely beautiful this morning. And you're wondering, why haven't I caught anything? You know, have I put too much bait out? But yeah, not too long after first light, the same rod on the same sort of line that I'd caught the first one, ripped off again, and another 30. So a brace of 30s to start the session here at Holdens Lake. And yeah, sun's out, lovely bit of weather. I'm enjoying myself and looking forward to see what the rest of the session brings.
Having sharp hooks prepped and ready to go can drastically reduce the time it takes to recast after landing a fish, which in turn will maximise your chances of catching more. So, after a great start to the session, it was time to keep the ball rolling and get on with some hook prep, checking the sharpness before carefully tweaking the hook points where necessary with the hook file. Hooks prepped and safely stored in a spare Kamakura box, I set about rigging up the third rod. arming my ever faithful combi multi-rig with a Cell fluoro wafter, using bait floss to attach the hook bait to a micro ring swivel, something that again I often prep in advance.
Right, well that's the third rod rigged up with the combi multi-rig and the little wafter, 15mm Cell wafter. But I'm looking out there and I'm thinking I'm probably causing myself more trouble than good by trying to squeeze 3 rods out there. I've got two of those naked chods fishing, and I just think that if I put that back on that shallow gravel, there's a real good chance that I'm just going to attract attention from the birds, and having that extra line in the water might not be beneficial. So yeah, for a minute I'm just going to prop that up against the bivvy and yeah, try and make up my mind what I'm going to do with it.
After seeing out bite time and still being undecided about what to do with my third rod, it was time to reset the other 2 rods positioned in slightly deeper water. So reeling them in before reaching for the marker rod and casting to the productive area. With the spot located, I could again walk down the bank to bait the area accurately, repeating the process that had already worked for me by catapulting a mix of essential cell boilies soaked in smart liquid around the marker float. Baiting complete, with the rods clipped up and ready to cast, I quickly tied fresh hook links, utilising the size 4 wide gape hooks I prepped earlier. So, a simple case of securing the hook with a knotless knot and tying the hook link to the swivel, running on the mainline with a single 1-turn blood knot. Finishing off the rig by adding a super buoyant pop-up to the D section. After a quick check in the edge, I recast the 2 naked chods over the baited spot and I was fishing once again.
Right then, the old sun is dropping over the horizon opposite, and it's putting an end to what has been a pretty quiet day really. Sun's been shining, not much wind, and for the most part I think the fish are just taking advantage of the sun in the upper layers and not really eating at the moment. But that said, now they've charged their batteries, I think there is a pretty good chance, and now it's getting a bit cooler, certainly during the hours of darkness, and I'll probably feel at my most confident tomorrow morning. Now, you might be wondering why I've only gone for 2 rods, and there sort of has been quite a bit of thought gone into that. First of all, I could have a rod really shallow where I was seeing the fish up the margin yesterday, but I think that rod just invites the birds onto your rigs, picking you up, and I just think if they're not going to leave it alone, I don't want to be recasting all the time, that we disturbing the area around the other 2 rods that are slightly deeper down the shelf. Now, the other sort of thing that I did contemplate was putting a zig out to the right of the 2 chods that I've got that are on the shelf. Now, I think a zig out there could definitely produce a bite, certainly in these conditions, but at the same time, if one of the bottom rods goes and the fish kites off the shelf, it's very, very likely that it will run straight through the zig. So, yeah, I think 2 rods fished well in this situation is probably the best port of call. And like I say, I'm feeling like there's a very, very good chance. Well, I said I was confident, but nothing has happened overnight. Not seen anything directly over the spot, and now I'm having second thoughts about, have I overbaited? Are the fish still here? You know, all the usual sort of anxieties that you would normally have. But I have seen the odd fish a little bit further on. There's like a shallow point that they sort of like to hold round, and I have seen a few fish jump in there. There is quite a few fish off to the right on another no fishing bank, so again in really, really shallow water. So I'm guessing that my line pressure, my casting, all of that sort of stuff has pushed the ones in front of me further back onto that point where they feel safe. And I think the best course of action for today is to see out bite time to perhaps 11, 11:30, reel the rods in, prop them up against the bivvy, go for a little walk with my Polaroids, maybe see if there's a move on elsewhere around the complex. But failing that, you know, just taking the lines out of the water should give them a bit of freedom, let them come into the area, see the bait, and yeah, we'll just take it from there really. It's always difficult to know exactly what to do, but I think resting the swim, taking a walk, looking for other opportunities, it all combined together is probably the best thing to do at this moment in time.
A huge benefit of fishing a complex like Norton Disney is that when the action is slow, there's not just the lake you're fishing to investigate, but also the other pits that can potentially provide you with a move and other opportunities. First things first, I wanted to check out swim 12 on Holdens Lake that held a no fishing bank similar to the one in my own swim. With the help of Polaroid glasses, I didn't take long to find groups of fish attracted to the shallow areas that ran along the margin, and an attractive proposition for me if indeed I did decide to move. With one good opportunity noted on Holdens, I looked on Pettit's next, spending a little time looking out from one of the central swims, giving a good view over the whole lake. Despite being known as a good peg and a great area to look from, I didn't notice any signs of carp activity, so I popped into the tackle shop for a quick chat to see what the bailiffs had to say. It seemed that everyone was encountering a similar situation to mine on Holdens, with the fish being fairly active but not quite in full feeding mode yet. So I took a quick look down the causeway between Billy's and Pettit's before heading back to Holdens.
So I've just got back from my little walk around the complex, and I've decided to stay where I am. I think it's a pretty safe bet. The fish get round that sort of point a lot of the time, and with the lines out of the water, there's a good chance that they may have found the bait. With that in mind, and the fact that the bird's been diving on that bait relentless, it's hard to know like how much bait is likely still out there. And with that in mind, I've decided to knock up another bucket of boilies all soaked up in the smart liquid. I'm just going to run you through exactly how I do that. It's not rocket science, but I do feel it's the best way to get the most from the smart liquid. Now, first thing I do is fill the bucket up, roughly a third, maybe getting on for half a bucket full of lake water. I then take my chosen smart liquid and squeeze that into the bucket. I don't try and squeeze it through the nozzle. I take the whole cap off and I put roughly half a bottle of smart liquid into roughly 5 kilos of boilies. That's the sort of ratio that I work with. I mix up the water and the smart liquid first, get it as best dissolved as I can using a bait spoon, and then I pour in my chosen boilies, which in this instance is the 15mm essential cell. You know, I love cell, I love essential cell, and particularly in the spring when I'm fishing yellow pop-ups, I really like to match that with the essential cell, and it's worked really well for me in the past. And a top tip for doing this is really you want to be doing it a few hours before you put it out into the lake. Ideally overnight. Overnight is a good sort of benchmark sort of amount of time, but what you don't want to do is make up loads of boilies for days in advance. If you were to say to leave the bucket in the sun for 3 whole days, there's a good chance that the active ingredients in the baits will turn and the boilies will start to float. So really you want to make up enough for 12 to 36 hours, maybe up until 48 hours, but I wouldn't make up more than that because, like you say, you do run the risk of the boilies turning in the water. But yeah, brilliant tactic, makes the boilies nice and soft, really easy for the fish to eat and digest. Secondly, they don't draw on any of the sort of odours of the lake bed because they're already saturated in that smart liquid solution. And obviously the smart liquid on top of that, number 3, is lifting up through the water column, which is particularly useful on deep lakes when you've got fish cruising around high in the water like you do in the spring. That sort of, those attractors are up in the layers, letting the fish know that the bait is there and hopefully drawing them down over the rig. So yeah, there you have it. That's what I've done with my boilies. Time to get them out there.
I was pretty sure of the area I was fishing by now, so there was no need for the marker rod to highlight the spot. Instead, I could catapult bait by eye. As I said, I would normally have soaked the boilies in smart liquid a bit longer to really penetrate the baits. I'd still be getting plenty of attraction, but perhaps I would have liked the baits a little softer. Anyway, with the spot primed, it was time to get the rods ready again. I was still unsure about fishing a third rod, so I kept my faith in the 2 rods fishing naked chod setups, presenting yellow cell pop-ups above any light weed or debris on the lake bed. After one last check of the rig, I recast the rods, making sure to fill the lead down onto the bottom before taking my time and care to sink the lines. The rods went back out without a hitch and the bobbins were set. Only one question remained: had resting the swim allowed the fish to come back in? I'd soon find out.
Well, seems like resting the swim has paid off. Let's let the fish come in to the baited area. Got out pretty minimally, just a couple of casts. I reckon it's only been out there half an hour. He's kited right out from that point out into the middle and now round to the right out in front of the next swim here. Hopefully it's not too weedy along the edge. It's in short now, just probably 10 yards out. Oh, pop-up's just come off. Nice. Get in there. Get in there. Yes. Well, that is what you call a confidence boost. You know, the nagging doubts after quite a considerable quiet spell. You know, you're thinking, am I in the right swim? Do I need to move? But resting the swim paid off, got the rods back out, and this one just under 22 pounds, 21.12. Super clean, and hopefully the start of a busy evening. Well, another very quiet night. 3 nights now and not a single bite in the dark, which could say that it's daytime feeding. You know, we had 1 bite in the morning and 2 in the sort of late afternoon. So yeah, maybe that's worth taking note of. Maybe resting the swim yesterday was the catalyst for that bite, and now that pushed off. The activity this morning actually was beyond the spot, you know, probably 40 to 50 yards further on, sort of in front of the guy opposite. Quite a few fish jumping out there. Trying to rack my brains about what I can do to encourage, sort of initiate a bite. The one thing that I haven't tried until now is a zig. You know, I've been reluctant to, because obviously if you're fishing 1 on the bottom or 2 on the bottom and 1 on a zig, and the bottom rod gets a take and kites, then you've got the potential to wipe out the zig rig as it sort of clotheslines that down. But I think it's the time of year for zigs. It's a deep lake in general. They're really getting up that marginal shelf in shallow water, so it does make sense that they would be drifting out in the upper layers, high up closer to the surface. So yeah, going to see out this morning's bite time again till about 11 o'clock, and then I'm going to roll out the old zig rig and see if we can make a change.
I finally had some purpose for the 3rd rod, removing the wafter rig setup and instead setting a zig rig, starting with a hybrid leg clip with a short 2-inch section of tungsten tubing coming from the tail rubber, just to further help prevent tangles. Then it was back to checking and prepping some hooks, this time smaller than the ones I'd prepped for the chod rigs, in the shape of some size 8 wide gapes. Once happy with the hook points, I could begin tying the rig, attaching the hook to an 8-pound cruiser control hook link using a simple 4-turn grinner knot. There's no need to create a hair, as I thread on a zigger liner next that holds a small piece of zig foam. Using the ruler on my rig box, I then carefully measure out the length of my zig and the height it will sit at, in this case 5 feet off the lake bed. To add some attraction to the zig, I then enhance the foam with the Smart Liquid. Full disclaimer here, I didn't expect the liquid to come out so quickly, so I wouldn't normally weigh so much. Anyway, with the zig in position, it was soon time to redo the other 2 rods.
So here's my naked chod presentation that I'm using here at Holdens Lake, and I actually showed exactly how I tied the hook section in a previous video, so if you'd like to see that, that's linked in the description. But I've made one sort of minor tweak to this rig for this session, in that I've incorporated a 5 to 6 inch leadless leader sort of buffer by the lead end, and the whole purpose of that is so that the swivel of the chod rig, when it's got a fish on and it's under tension, that tension is never really on the main line. The bead just pops over the knot once the fish gets hooked, and then obviously can slide all the way down to the lead. But the main purpose of having it away from the lead in the first place is so that when you're reeling in, like during a miscast, that hook point never comes into contact with the lead. So yeah, the naked chod is absolutely brilliant for single hook baits. It's brilliant for pop-up boilie fishing, and especially when you've got sort of minimal debris like low-lying weed, some soft silt, anything like that where you've got the potential for the lead to plummet into the bottom. That sort of gap between the beads allows the rig to slide up and always present, if I can get hold of this pop-up, always present over the debris. So yeah, a very minimal but very effective rig for fishing pop-ups.
As I cast the chods back to the spot, I was confident with the approach and happy with the tweaks I'd made through the session so far. Wafters, chods, rest in the swim, and now a zig. I tried what I could, and everything under my control, like always using sharp hooks, casting accurately and baiting appropriately. I just needed the carp to play ball.
Right then, middle of the afternoon, very, very quiet, not hardly any wind, blazing sunshine, and probably not the best conditions for a bite at this time. But that said, John's had the old drone in the sky to get his general GVs, and there's been quite a few fish on that shallow bar that sort of juts out off that point in front, and they're quite active, some of them. Some of them are just sitting in the sun, but some of them are like repeatedly flanking, which is something that you see coming out of winter, sort of early spring. A lot of the time, that's why the fish are so active. They've got like leeches and parasites on their skin from sort of laying up through the winter, and as the water warms up, they come up in the layers. They want to warm up, they sort of supercharge their batteries, but they're also covered in these leeches, and which I think they jump out. You get a lot more activity for the feeding response that you're not getting. I just think the water's still pretty cold for them. They're not eating loads and loads of bait at the minute, and despite them being out there swimming around, itching themselves off, we're not really converting it into action. But we've had a couple of bites in the evening, and we've still got this evening to go, and then one more night and another morning period. So I'm happy with the rods. They're on good spots, and yeah, I think it's just a case of waiting for the sun to dip, for them to drift off of that shallow ledge, and maybe we might get one more chance just yet.
The still, hot conditions of the afternoon were far from ideal, and all I could do now was patiently watch the water, hoping things would be better later in the day. Sadly, the bobbins remained motionless through the evening spell, and I was soon left watching the water as the sun began to set.
Well, it's the final morning and it's pretty cold, frost overnight again, which seems to be a common theme of this session, especially this April. This April has been really sunny at times, but also freezing cold at night. 3 fish, 2 30s, not to be sniffed at, you know, got amongst the better fish straight away really, and then it's petered out. There was a lot of fish in the swim on arrival, and then after sort of getting the rods out, getting a bit of bait out, managing to catch a couple, they've just eased back away from me a little bit. There's a point with really shallow water on it, and they're just a little bit too far, you know, sort of hanging off the back, almost like they know I'm here. Often when the water is cold, as it is at the moment, they're just coming out of winter, you know, the activity levels can be more than what the sort of action levels are, because the fish really aren't really heavily on the bait, you know. Possibly I put too much bait out at times, but I don't think that's the situation. I think it's more that, you know, they're heavily pressured fish, caught a couple and they've just eased away from me, as well as some of the other fish have moved off down the other end of the lake, so it's not like I'm sat on the main mother pod as such. But yeah, key takeaways, obviously this time of year, depth, very important, getting the rigs in the right depth where they're likely to encounter them. You know, they're very likely to be in the upper layers or on deeper lakes, as they are here at the moment. Bright pop-ups, another brilliant tactic in the spring. Zig rigs, another brilliant tactic in the spring. And yeah, use a bait that you know that they like, that's highly visual, like the essential cell or the cell, very digestible. And yeah, I'm sure if it was just a couple of weeks later, we'd have had quite a few more, but rods are still in, still fish showing just beyond me, and we'll just see out this morning period and see if we can get one. But if you don't hear from me, we obviously didn't manage to convert another, but like I say, 2 30s is not to be sniffed at. Right, we've come to the end of our session here at Holdens Lake, and a couple of 30s, a lovely venue and somewhere I can't wait to come back to. Hope you enjoyed the film. If you have, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.